Okay, here is speedrun of whack-a-mole case. Couple tricky rules. The multiplier, it resets if you hit a mole or if you hit a reset. Otherwise, it grows geometrically. Other tricky thing is that only moles can be repeat. Anything else that you hit, if you hit a mole, you can hit it as many times as you want. But anything else that you hit, any other grid space, if you hit it, it doesn't count unless it's a mole. A few lambdas and VBA things I'm going to use. The file for these is downloadable. The link is in the description. Exists is a lambda that checks if a value exists in an array and gives 1 or 0. X indirect is the same as regular indirect, but it is non-volatile. Ref to RC and RC to ref. RC is row column coordinates, so it takes, B2 and turns it into 2, or vice versa. Xmod is a one-based version of the modulo remainder operator, right? Normally the remainder operator is 0-based, right? It goes from 0 to b minus 1. But in Excel, we love to make things one-based. So this one is one-based. It goes from 1 to b. Only numbers. That is a regex based lambda, and it takes a string and pulls out only the digits and ignores everything else. And then finally, X text split is the same as the built-in text split, but it makes it a column, trims it, and makes it a numeric format if that matters. And that's all I need. So go. All right. Yes, I know I have lambdas already. Okay, what cell is that? So X indirect grid exclamation mark and the reference, right? Will give me that. There's level 1. So now for this one, I'm going to use text split of this. I'm going to use X text split of this by the semicolon. So there's my addresses. Now I want the symbol. So X indirect, again, is, grid exclamation mark and the address, which comes from E18. That's my symbols. Now I need the points. So if the first character is a M, right? That means it's a mole, so it's worth points. So only numbers of F18. And if it's not, then it's worth 0 points. So that's how many points each cell is worth. It's asking for the total points, which is 384, and there's level 2. Level 3 introduces resets and multipliers, which means it also introduces repeats, right? Because remember I said only moles can repeat. Nothing else is allowed to repeat. So if I move this out a bit, I'm going to see if these addresses are repeats by checking exist, right? So E17 colon E $17 is all the previous addresses. I'm going to see if E18, the new address, exists there or not. All right, so that tells me if they're a repeat. Now the symbol 2 is the new symbol, right? So if it's not a repeat, then yeah, we get the symbol F18. All right. Also, if it's a mole, it's allowed to repeat. So if F18 starts with M, then it also can repeat. Otherwise, it cannot repeat, and it's going to be a blank. All right, so that's this. I'm not ready for points yet because I got to do multiplier. So new multiplier. I'm going to do a new multiplier, and I'm going to do a running multiplier. So the new multiplier is simply if this starts with a X, right? Then only numbers of H18, right? Multiplier number, H18. Otherwise, 1. That's my default for not really a multiplier. Okay, so running multiplier always starts at 1 because multipliers take effect on the next time. Multipliers can reset if this starts with an M, right? Then it resets because moles reset the multiplier. Also, resets reset the multiplier. So if it starts with a R, resets the multiplier. Otherwise, the multiplier is the previous one times the new multiplier, which is, let's see. So if it starts with R, then it resets. Otherwise, this is ifs. Ifs, not just if. All right, so there's our running multiplier. And now the points, if it's a mole, then it's only numbers times the multiplier. So that's the number of points for each hit. And now I got to track the total points, taking into account resets. So, and give myself a starting point is 0, right? So now the total points, if this starts with a reset, right? Then the total points is 0. Otherwise, the total points is last time's points plus K18 this time's points. That's my total points. Total points at the end of the game is 138. That is level 3. Now level 4, we got to handle, the game is going to be the same. So I'm just going to move this over here for a minute. And I got to handle shifts, right? So the way we're going to handle shifts is we're going to work backwards and cancel them out, right? So I take my shift thing and put it here. I mean, I need to make another one of these, right? Because I got to look up shifts separately from the grid values. So A1 to E5 is that, but it's got to be unmerged. So A1 to E5 is here. F1 to J5 is here, and I think we can hopefully see the pattern from here. These go this way. The reason why I'm using these arrows is because I already have a lookup table in my prep that tells you what the row and column changes are for each arrow. Right, so I'm going to use that in a minute to work backwards and undo all the grid movements. So here's my lookup. I'm going to add a none, right, which has 0, 0 for arrow column moves. Just call this G2, make it a little simpler, and we're ready to shift. All right, so make coordinates first, right? So the original row column is ref to RC of E18. And I'm going to make that horizontal array this time. So then we're going to do the arrow, which is X indirect. G2 is where I put the arrows, exclamation mark, and the address. So this is going to give me the arrow. This is going to give me, the arrow row column is looking up the arrow here on my prep table, lock that with F4, take both of these, lock those with F4. Now I've got the row column changes for each arrow. Now I got to subtract them to get the final row column, right? So that is the starting point minus the sum of all the old arrows, which is I17 colon I $17 is all the prior arrows. Subtract out. One more thing I got to do is Xmod because the grid can cycle every 15, right? So if it goes over, if you go under 1 or over 15, it cycles back around. So now I've got the new row column, the new address, which is the one it's going to hit. So RC back to ref on the row and the column, which is L18. Now I can bring this stuff back, right? Because we're ready to play our game now. So this is going to be based on the new address. The symbol is going to be based on the new address, and whether it's a repeat or not is also going to be based on the new address, right? So now the repeats are there and everything adds up. The game gets played the same and we end up with our answer of 481. All right, finally we got to do reverses. This is actually relatively easy compared to the last two levels, which is just taking this. So I'm just going to reverse these arrows if I have to, right? So this, I'm going to keep track of the direction. Always starts at 1, which is forward, and then -1 is going to be backwards. So if the prior symbol starts with V, then it's this times -1 to reverse it. Otherwise, it's just same direction. So there's the directions. And then the row column changes from the arrows just get multiplied by this direction. And that'll reverse them if we need to. And that's it. There's our final answer of 575. Ready to check the case, which these answer checks are not lined up correctly, which is not what I wanted, right? So if E48 equals E48, then 1, otherwise 0. I don't need the big red X's, so I'll just use 1 and 0. All right, there we go. These are all checks. These are all correct, so 1,000 points so far. All right, what cell is most frequently selected across all levels? I've got all the levels here, and I got to do 2-row X-text split on this by the semicolon just to give me a big thing of all the references, and then I have a frequency table subroutine that I can use for this. So I use frequency table subroutine, and that's the most frequent one, M3. Total number of times the grid does not shift on level 4. All right, so I'm going to copy level 4 and make this bonus 2. So now I've got bonus 2. So what do I want to know? I want to know count if the arrow is none. So if the arrow is none, then there are 84 of those. 84. All right, and these I think are not lined up either, right? Yeah, there we go. Finally, 4 rules hit the same cell 20 consecutive times. So my choices are these cells, right? So got a little subroutine here that will give me the address. This tall board subroutine just gives me the addresses and everything else, but I only need the addresses. Oh no, I don't replace that. I'm going to make this B3. All right, so this can be bonus 3. And from the tall board, I'm going to take the addresses and I'm going to do a little what if table for each address. So let's say that this one was just A1. The rest of these, and I need, 20 of these, it said. So I'll count out 20 rows of the same number, of the same cell, right? Hitting based on the full level 5 rules. That is my final number. I turn the what if on now, but not based on the question number. I got to make a new what if where the what if is based on what if I changed the column input is right here. All right, so now I've got that. So what do I want? Do I want the number or the grid? Which cell gives the most points, right? So I want the cell. So now I'm going to use biggest of these. There's another lambda. It just looks on the biggest of this and finds the corresponding one of these, which is G13, 1250. Stop. 13 minutes, 7 seconds, and that's time. Thank you for watching.